looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Happy New Year and welcome to the 49ers-Was podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today, we're going to talk about the 49ers' 27-10 victory over the Washington Commanders. We're going to go over stats, Pro Football Focus ratings, snap counts, record set, why the 49ers can't rest all or most of their starters. There are logistical and roster-related reasons for that, and I will preview the 49ers hosting the Rams this upcoming Sunday. In the plus section, we're going to be talking about some college football bowl games and the playoff semifinals that were on last night. I'm going to review Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and conclude by making Week 18 NFL picks. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So in a game that was a bit slow-moving in the first half with Washington hanging around, the Niners scored the last 17 points of the game to beat the Commanders 27-10. Total yards, 408 to 225 in favor of the Niners. The Commanders had 2 turnovers, San Francisco none. First downs, 28-12, and time of possession plus 16 and a half minutes, both in favor of San Francisco. Purdy goes 22 of 28, 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sam Howell, 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and he was sacked once. Eli Mitchell led the way on the ground, 17 for 80 and a touchdown. McCaffrey, 14 for 64. As a team, they ran it 39 times for 184 yards and 1 touchdown. Brian Robinson led the way for the Commanders, 9 for 44. As a team, 14 rushes for 62 yards. Receiving, Ayuk 7 for 114 and a touchdown. Debo 5 for 37 and a touchdown. Kittle 3 for 29 and McCaffrey 4 for 27. For Washington, Terry McLaurin 4 for 61 and 1 score. Curtis Samuel 3 for 33. Niners only had 1 sack. It came courtesy of Cleveland Farrell. They did have 2 interceptions. Both starting outside cornerbacks, Charvarius Ward and Diamador Lenore, had 1 each. You know, like I mentioned, this is a game that the Niners were up 10-0. Then the Commanders came back and tied it 10-10 in a 13-10 game in favor of San Francisco at the half. Washington moved the ball well in the first half, both on the ground and through the air. Robinson had some pretty good runs. They had that deep shot that they took to Terry McLaurin, got behind Diamador Lenore. And then McLaurin winds up later scoring the touchdown to tie the game at 10. Niners kick a field goal at the end of the half to go up 13-10 at halftime. And then whatever adjustments Steve Wilks and the defensive staff and team made, they stuck because the Commanders scored 0 points and had 2 interceptions in the second half. I'm not going to say the 49ers were sleepwalking through the game. I mean, they responded immediately. First drive touchdown, and I believe there was a punt, then a field goal, and then Washington came back. But Purdy, obviously very efficient, over 75% again, 22 of 28, 230 and 2 touchdowns. Yes, one was a little push pass to Debo that was almost like a glorified jet sweep, but hey, the Chiefs and a lot of teams do that as well. So give him 2 more touchdowns on the year to finish with 31. Well, maybe not finish with. We'll see if he's going to play against the Rams, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But a good bounce-back game. And I was asking people online, what would a bounce-back game look like for the Niners? And people were going nuts, like 40-0. Purdy's got to throw 4 touchdowns. They have to, dismantle, dominate this team. And they did. The Niners wore them down, got out to a lead, never trailed, wore them down second half, and then scored the last 17 points of the game for the only 14 points in the second half. Now, Pro Football Focus ratings, top 5 highest rated on offense, tackle Trent Williams, 93.2, Purdy, 89.1, center Jake Brendel, 87.7, Colton McKivitz, 79.9, and Brandon Ayuk, 79.4. On defense, Top 5, Charvarius Ward, 91.5, Dre Greenlaw, 88, Diamador Lenore, 81.9, Isaiah Oliver, 90 on 4 snaps, and Nick Bosa, 74.5. 3 lowest rated on offense, tight end Charlie Werner, 57.8 on 17 snaps, Sam Darnold, 43 on 5 snaps, and receiver Ronnie Bell, 42.6 on 10 snaps. 3 lowest rated on defense, defensive end Randy Gregory, 53 on 10 snaps, defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw, 42.7 on 29 snaps, and fellow defensive tackle Kevin Givens, 28.6 on 17 snaps. Look, the O-line held, obviously against a team without their top 2 pass rushers who were traded away a couple months ago. Trent Williams had a really good game, and that was even coming off of, a groin strain the week before. Colton McKivitz had a good game. Brendel was part of the top 5. The offense was its normal, efficient self, and the defense made its adjustments and got stops, hence the strong rating from Ward and Lenore with those 2 takeaways. And Bosa was in on something that looked like a sack on Sam Howell. They tackled Howell behind the line of scrimmage, but I guess it looked to be a broken play, and maybe they characterized it more as a run. Otherwise, Bosa would have had a sack as well. But strong effort on both sides of the ball against a team that's not very good. And conversely, look at what the Eagles did at home against a team that's not very good, the Cardinals. They lost. So with the 49ers beating Washington, with the Eagles losing at home to the Cardinals, and the Cowboys beating the Lions, the 49ers clinch the number 1 seed through the playoffs. The other NFC teams, the 3 I mentioned, Philly, Dallas, and Detroit, now jockeying for 2, 3, and 5. Whoever loses the NFC East will be the 5 seed and go to the winner of the NFC South. Still undetermined, Tampa Bay, New Orleans, or Atlanta. But individual records, Brock Purdy set a single season passing record yardage-wise, 4,280, topping Jeff Garcia's mark in 2000. Purdy did this in over 65 fewer passes than 65 or more fewer passes than Steve Young, who went over 4,000 twice, and Jeff Garcia. So 65 plus passes for Purdy. That's 2 games worth. So if you want to say he achieved this in 14 games versus 16, you can look at it that way, or just know that he had 2 games worth of fewer attempts than other players or what his average was. So again, efficiency, a very high yards per attempt. And, Purdy really built off of that 6-game sample where he had, I think, 13 touchdowns and 3 interceptions the last 6 games of the regular season, and parlayed that into a 31 touchdown, 11 interception season coming off of UCL surgery. I don't know if he's really, I guess he's eligible, but I don't know if he's going to win Comeback Player of the Year because he didn't miss time last year during the regular season, and I'm sure that's how folks that give votes would view that. But it's more than just Purdy, right? The 49ers are now the first team in NFL history with a running back, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end, all to post 1,000 or more scrimmage yards in a season. Debo didn't get there receiving-wise, but with his rushing yards, he got to over 1,000, and there's a game remaining, but that game is game 17. Something like this hasn't been done since the Indianapolis Colts in 2004, but that was with a running back and 3 receivers, not a running back, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end. A very diverse offense, at least when it comes to the starters and the yardage that these players are putting up, especially someone like a Brandon Ayuk going over 1,300 passing yards, and he doesn't get a ton of volume. He's not a Tyreek Hill, a Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, at least when Carr was there. They're spreading the ball obviously around, and they're gaining yards on big plays or yards after the catch. but the receptions are under 80, under 75. To still break over 1,000 or 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 is a testament to the efficiency of Shanahan's offense and how Brock Purdy executes it. Now, not all fantastic news coming out of the Commanders game. Couple injuries to report and discuss. Christian McCaffrey left the game. It was reported as a mild calf strain. I think he had some diagnostic imaging. Mild, McCaffrey even said if that was a playoff game, he would have gone back in against the Commanders. He is definitely not playing this week against the Rams. So he will have essentially 3 weeks to heal. And Shanahan has said that they're very confident that he will be ready to go for the playoff game and should be good to keep, practicing or get back to practicing next week. And that's their bye week. And they still have the week after that to prepare for whomever they would be playing. Cornerback Ambry Thomas has a broken hand. Going into this game, they knew he would need surgery. I didn't even know that. And apparently he was wearing some sort of not a club, but a cast on it to protect the hand somewhat. He did have surgery, or he's having surgery today, Tuesday. If he had to play on Sunday against the Rams, it sounds like he might be able to, but with the rest, they'll let that hand heal as much as it can in the next 3 weeks, which again, I'm not sure exactly what's going on or how fast his bones can heal, but I'm sure he'll have some sort of a club or cast on it for the divisional round playoff game. But those are two injuries that factor into why San Francisco cannot rest all or even most of their starters for this upcoming game against the Rams. Now, as you know, there's 53 players on an active roster and then 16 players on a practice squad. You'll get a 17th player if you have an international player on your practice squad. It doesn't count against the 16-player max. But on game day, you can only have 48 players dress for games. Here's who we know who is going to be out. McCaffrey's going to be out. Left guard, Aaron Banks, I'm fairly certain is going to be out because he re-aggravated turf toe. So for him to be out this week, then the bye week, hopefully he's okay for the divisional round. Eric Armstead already has been declared out. And I would imagine that Jair Brown, the rookie safety, who has a knee sprain, that they would probably sit him as well and not risk further aggravating something that could keep him out longer. But those are then 4 positions on the team: running back, offensive line, defensive line, and safety, that they're going to be down a person. So there's less of an opportunity to rest someone from those positions because you're already down somebody. Let's start at running back. With McCaffrey out, only Eli Mitchell and Jordan Mason are on the roster, and they're not going to play with 2 running backs. So they will have to elevate Ty Davis-Price from the practice squad, and you're only allowed 2 practice squad elevations. So that's a lock as number 1. If Shanahan only plays with 2 running backs and gives Juice some carries or something, I would be extremely surprised. So that would be elevation number 1. If Jair Brown is out, and I think he will be, that means there's only 2 safeties on the roster now. It's Gibson and it's Logan Ryan. Now, in a pinch, Isaiah Oliver used to be a safety, could play some safety. And again, it's a game that doesn't mean anything for San Francisco. You just want to be crisp. You want to execute. You don't want to be stagnant, and you don't want to get hurt. The outcome of the game doesn't mean anything for them. So Oliver could be your number 3 safety on your team. Let's just say they hold Kittle out. Just because he's 30 years old. He's taking a lot of wear and tear. If they do that, there's only 2 tight ends healthy on the active roster: Charlie Werner and Braden Willis. Because Ross Dwelly, I forgot to mention him earlier, he's out with an ankle sprain also. He's not going to play. So Kittle may have to play some. Wide receiver, Juwan Jennings hasn't played the last 2 weeks because of a concussion, and it's a concussion that's bad enough that he hasn't been able to exit the concussion protocol. So there's a possibility he doesn't play, and if that's the case, then you only have 4 wide receivers active: Debo, Ayuk, Connolly, and Bell. And I'm sure you don't want to play Debo and Ayuk any more than you have to. So wide receiver might be a position you need to elevate. If Spencer Burford, right guard, doesn't play because he's in concussion protocol also, now you only have 7 offensive linemen because Banks is going to be out. If Burford's out, now you only have 7 left, and you have to dress 8 for game days. So they may need to elevate an offensive lineman just to have the requisite number 8 active. And you can, have Trent Williams dress and maybe you don't play him, or you play him for a series or a quarter and then have, all backups play. But right now on their roster, they do not have enough offensive linemen for a game day roster. Even with Ambry Thomas being out, there's still 5 cornerbacks on the roster. But that's including Charvarius Ward, who could potentially sit. There are so many factors and considerations here. But overall, like I just mentioned, so running back, safety, tight end, wide receiver, and offensive line are all, we won't call them issues, but really positions to consider when who's going to play and how much are people going to play. There's going to be 5 inactives. It's going to be McCaffrey. It's going to be Banks. It's going to be Dwelly. It's going to be Armstead and somebody else. Or maybe 2 or 3 somebody else's if they elevate 2 from the practice squad. So those are the positions that Shanahan and company really has to think about. On top of that, though, there are positions where they do have no injuries or a surplus of players and they can get away with sitting some folks. If I were in charge, here's who I would sit all game. I'd sit Brock. There is absolutely no reason to risk anything. You could make Brock the emergency inactive number 3. Play Darnold all game if you want, or play him a half and get Allen some reps as well. But I would sit. There is no reason. Like you're good at the quarterback position. You have 3 on the roster. No reason to play Brock. I'd sit Bosa. Bosa's had a light workload like the past month when I'm looking at snap counts, but still, if I had to pick one defensive end out of the 5 they have on the team, I would sit him all game, and I would try to rotate, give Chase Young as few snaps as possible. Then you have Farrell, you have Randy Gregory, you have Robert Beal. You're okay there with 4. I'd sit Fred Warner. They have a surplus of linebackers between Greenlaw, Oren Burks, Jalen Graham, Demetrius Flanagan, Fowles, and D. Winters. That's 5. You're good. You could probably even go into a game with 4 linebackers and be okay. And at corner, I'd sit Ward. He's clearly your best cornerback. Again, you don't want anything stupid, defending somebody, getting juked or getting rolled on, going up to knock away a jump ball, landing on your ankle the wrong way. There's no reason. Like I said, even with Thomas out, you have 5 cornerbacks. You could get away with playing a game with 4. Again, this game doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. So I would sit Ward all game. Now, who I would sit most of the game, or at least half the game, I'd sit Trent Williams. If they're able to elevate another offensive lineman due to positions elsewhere and they could sit him all game, I would. I mean, he is 35 years old. He's had, foot and ankle issues this year and last year, but I feel like he may have to play a bit. Debo or Ayuk, if they each just play a quarter and maybe Debo plays the first quarter, Ayuk plays the second, or they both just play the first, something, but you need receivers on the field, and we don't know what's going on with Jennings. Kittle should not play. I mean, he plays basically all game, every game. I would sit him for at least half. Greenlaw, again, that's surplus of linebackers. And Javon Hargrave looked okay from the hamstring injury the past 2 games, but another player that I think, not a young player, I think 30, 31, that if he plays half the game, you get him out, end of the second, early third quarter, I think that would be totally fine. And I talk about elevations. Who would I elevate from the practice squad? I think Ty Davis-Price is a no-brainer. If Burford can't play, they have to elevate an offensive lineman. Now it's 2 weeks out of the concussion protocol. Hopefully he could play, and then they would have their 8 offensive linemen active. But if Burford can play and Jennings can't, Juwan Jennings cannot, then you elevate a receiver to have a fifth receiver to give Ayuk and Debo as much time off the field as possible. If Burford and Jennings can both play, then I would go safety to have another third pure safety on the roster just in case. And at some point, if you want to give either Logan Ryan or Tayshaun Gibson a couple snaps off, that would be fine as well. But a lot of things that need to be cleared up health-wise. Again, McCaffrey's definitely out. Armstead's out. Dwelly's out. Banks more than likely. Jair Brown more than likely. Jennings and Burford were not sure. A lot for them to sort out. So when Kyle Shanahan said, when he was asked, are you going to rest your starters? He said, not as many as you may think. So to me, the people that I would sit all game are 4 players. Not a lot, right? Brock, Bosa, Warner, Travarius Ward. And then who I would sit most or half the game, 6 players. Williams, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Greenlaw, and Hargrave. So in total, 10. 10 players that would either sit all game or half the game. I think that's reasonable. 10 players of a 48-man roster. 11 starters on offense, 11 starters on defense. That leaves you 38 players really left to play either all the game or half the game. I think that could be juggled efficiently or effectively. We'll see. Still got about 5 days to go and see who can clear concussion protocol and who should go and who shouldn't. But, my preview for this game, it's tough to preview a game where you don't know who's playing and who's not. This is like a glorified preseason game for San Francisco. It's not a game they can knock the Rams out of. Even if it was that, I don't think San Francisco would play starters longer just to knock the Rams out. The Rams are the 6th seed. They are playing to remain the 6th seed. If they lose and the Packers win, I believe the Rams fall to 7, or if it's another team that winds up winning. But the Rams seem to have some incentive to play and win. Offensively, looked pretty good this year behind Matt Stafford. Kyron Williams at running backs got over 1,100 yards, and he missed 2 or 3 games. Cooper Kupp and Nakua healthy at receiver, and Tyler Higbee at tight end. On defense, Aaron Donald, Kobe Turner, the 2 defensive tackles, Byron Young, outside linebacker, edge rusher, and Jordan Fuller at safety. As a team, 38 sacks, kind of middle of the road. Aaron Donald has 8, Kobe Turner 9, Byron Young 7. So that 3 players on the defensive line account for 24 of the 38 total sacks. 10 interceptions as a team on the low end. Safety Jordan Fuller has 3. Now let's look at where the Rams rank statistically. Offensively, they are 7th overall, 8th passing, averaging 245 a game, 10th rushing, averaging 121, and 8th in points scored, 23.9 per game. On defense, they are 19th overall, 24th against the pass, allowing 235, 12th against the run, allowing 106, and 19th in points allowed, allowing 22.3 points per game. Matchups to watch, like any way I would normally break down a game, it's kind of thrown out the window, especially since I'm doing this podcast on Tuesday where there's so much to be determined. I honestly don't have much to say here. Like, I think this is a game that unless McVay doesn't care, 6 or 7 seed, because they don't even know, are they going to be playing the Rams, the Lions, or the Cowboys? They have no idea. It's going to be one of those 3 teams. So, does it matter to them if they're the 6 or 7? Well, I guess technically if you're the 6th seed, there's the outside possibility if the number 7 seed wins both of their games as well, the Rams could host the NFC Championship game, but that's a long shot. I don't know who they match up best or worst with. Maybe they match up best with Philly right now because just Philly is falling apart. But there's no guy. Who knows who's going to win the East? The Lions already have won the North, but they could either be the 2 or 3 seed depending on what happens with Dallas and Philadelphia. So, listen, this is a game San Francisco, I'm sure Shanahan just wants to execute, and Steve Wilkes, they want to execute the offense and defense efficiently with whoever's in. listen, if they get to Stafford a couple times, if they pick him off, if they, hold him to under 20 and under 20 points, and, Darnold or Allen is able to drive them, or if Purdy plays for a quarter, when they look good, like think of like a preseason game when the starters play a drive, which is still ridiculous. Why would you suit players up to play a drive? But if players suit up and they play a quarter and they score and they look, it looks like the Niners offense, I think Shanahan could maybe take something away from that, because this is a team in the Rams that they might see in the playoffs. And it's a coach and a team and a roster and a scheme that they're very familiar with. I think this is a game where, if it holds and McVay thinks that this is a game that they need to win to keep the number 6 seed, if that's important to McVay, then I think it's a game that they win, I'm going to say 24-20. Take that for what it's worth. It's nice to have a no-pressure game weekend. I'll still be watching the game. I'll still be rooting for them. I mean, I want them to win versus lose, but I don't want them to win at the expense of starters playing more than they need to, or the risk of anybody getting hurt. But it's a game to watch. It's a Sunday. What else am I doing Sunday afternoon at 4:25? And then the next week, there's a bye, so we'll be watching playoff games, just not a Niner playoff game. So I will take the Rams. It means more to them, and they will have more starters playing. And listen, kudos to Sean McVay. This was a team that a lot of people thought was a bottom 5 roster. I think I had them pegged for 5 or 6 wins. They've won 9 games. They might win 10. They are in the playoffs. They're rolling into the playoffs somewhat hot. The only loss in the past 6 games was at Baltimore in overtime. That was the team that played Baltimore best out of their 13 wins. So it's got to count for something. So kudos to Sean McVay for getting in. We'll see what both teams look like roster-wise on Sunday. But that concludes the 49ers section of the podcast. Stay right here. We're going to be discussing college bowl games, the semifinals, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and make Week 18 NFL picks. Stay right here.
It's plus time.
So college bowl season wrapping up. We had the semifinals on last night, the national championship being played this upcoming Monday. Overall, the bowl games were by and large dreadful. Maybe I watched parts of half of the bowl games, and they're like 44, 47 bowl games, entirely too many. Having a conversation with my buddy this week, as exciting as it is for a program to make a bowl game, how profitable is it for the bowl itself? These stadiums are half full at best when you have to talk about employees, concessions, operating expenses for just having a stadium open. Is it worth it? I guess so. That's why there's all these ridiculous bullshit rinky-dink bowl games that have exploded the past 20 years, getting that bowl number up into the mid-40s or low to mid-40s. And maybe it's good for tourism, for the host city, getting another 20, 30,000 people in the local economy. That's great. But this whole 6 wins makes you bowl eligible thing is a little weak. It should be 7 wins makes you bowl eligible. And then maybe there's some sort of a lottery for 6-win teams. But the bowls have not really been appealing until last night's semifinal. And we will get there. Like a team like Iowa, offensively challenged, got shut out by Michigan in their previous game, the Big Ten championship game, where the over-under on Iowa scoring points in either half against Michigan was 0.5 points. That if they scored a safety or a field goal, that was the over. Vegas thought they were going to get shut out, and they did. I'm not sure what the over-under was for the Hawkeyes bowl game, but they lost 35-0 against Tennessee. So congratulations, Iowa Hawkeyes. You've been shut out in consecutive games, consecutive big games, Big Ten championship, whatever the hell bowl game it was. I don't even know. I didn't watch any of it. Iowa was held to 173 yards. They turned it over 3 times, only had 11 first downs. And second consecutive shutout. Happy holidays to the Iowa players, staff, and fans. Then we were treated to some disgusting games. And you'll know one of them that I'm talking about. So the whole Georgia-Florida State fiasco. And Florida State had obviously their best player, quarterback injured, out. Once they did not make the semifinals, you had multiple players opt out. You had numerous players enter the transfer portal. And they got matched up with Oregon. And if you don't know already, with Georgia. Georgia beat them 63-3. Let's just go through the stats. It was as thorough as you might imagine. Yardage-wise, 673 to 209. 4 turnovers for Florida State. First downs, 36 to 11. Time of possession, 11 minutes more, obviously all in favor of Georgia. Just want to point something out. It was well documented the number of players that Florida State did not have available to them. They didn't have 27 players available, whether it was injury, opt-out, or transfer portal. Georgia also did not have 27 players available due to injury or transfer portal. Now, the players that transferred from Georgia were backup players. They're players that realize that they really aren't going to crack the starting lineup or start anytime soon, had a better opportunity somewhere else, entered the transfer portal. But just as many players for Georgia were unavailable as were for Florida. Now, Florida had more starters. I understand. I'm not trying to paint it as, well, the teams were even. They were not. Florida State was down to their third string quarterback. I get it. But at some point during this game, Georgia's backups were in also. And they still got drubbed. Florida State kicked a field goal in either the first or second quarter. That was it. I forget what it was. 42-0 at the half or 45-0 at the half, 45-3, something like that. Georgia scores nine times, all touchdowns. Florida State got worked. You can't judge the Florida State program completely by what happened on the field. But can we at least say, man, the players were being bitches? If you didn't opt into the transfer portal and you were a starter and you were coming back next year and you didn't play, you were a bitch. And maybe a little bit of a coward. Maybe a little bit of a coward knowing that no matter what, you were going to lose to Georgia. Even if Florida State had the team on the field that beat Louisville in the ACC championship game, they would have lost by 30. Maybe it's not 63-3. Maybe it's 43-13. They still would have gotten drubbed. And I hate to call players like cowards, that they're fearful of getting humiliated. I'm hoping that wasn't it, and it probably wasn't it. But the whole sour grapes, boo-hoo bullshit stuff. What about your fans traveling from Tallahassee to wherever the hell I don't remember what bowl game this was. To just watch your team get annihilated, to watch a shell of your team get annihilated? That's awful. That's JV shit. Now, that's just embarrassment 1 of 2. Now, embarrassment number 2 is the Fiesta Bowl, where Oregon destroyed Liberty 45-6. Liberty was up 6-0, scored in the first quarter, and then Oregon said, all right, let's get serious, and we're just going to destroy you. Basically doubled them up in yards, 584 to 294. Liberty had 2 turnovers. First downs were 28-15 in favor of Oregon, and Oregon had a 10.5-minute time of possession advantage. Liberty won their conference. I think they were ranked 23 or 24 going into the game. Oregon was 7 or 8. It was a mismatch from the jump, but based on the rules, this is the last year of the 4-team playoff. Next year we're going to 12 teams, and Liberty still would have made it because they won their conference. If this was next year, Liberty still would have been part of the 12-team playoff and probably played, if they were the 12, they'd be playing the number 5 seed, a team better than Oregon, maybe a Georgia, and would have gotten humiliated even more. This has nothing to do with Liberty. I'm not bad-mouthing them or slandering them at all. They were outclassed. But if I'm the selection committee and you have an inkling, because I don't remember how far after the announcement of the semifinals that they then announced the rest of the bowl games or these, the Oregon game, the Georgia-Florida State game, I'm not sure. But if you had an inkling that, maybe some Florida State players are going to opt out, or not play because they're disappointed or pissed. Maybe, I don't know, you get a feel from Coach Norvell. Something. Florida State should have played Liberty. That would have been even a depleted Florida State team. And what we saw against Georgia, I'm not sure if that Florida State team could have beaten Liberty. But if Florida State had a couple players come back and be like, you know what, I want to take all my anger and frustration and how pissed I am at the selection committee out on the Liberty Flames, great, do that. It would have been a more competitive game for everybody. And, oh, by the way, if that happened, we would have had Oregon and Georgia. What kind of consolation prize was Georgia for Florida State after Florida State won all their games, their conference championship, their quarterback gets knocked out, and that's the reason why they were not part of the playoff? They were not one of the 4 best teams. Maybe they were one of the 4 most deserving teams, but they were not one of the 4 best teams. So instead of seeing Florida State get embarrassed at a semifinal game, they got embarrassed instead a day or two before against Georgia. I don't care if it's not, there was going to be a non-sexy matchup here somewhere. Liberty played Oregon. They got killed. They would have gotten killed by Georgia if they played them. Who knows what would have happened against Florida State? I think we could all agree out of those 3 teams, Oregon, Georgia, Florida State would have been the most competitive game with Liberty. And don't you think Oregon and Georgia would have been a little bit more competitive than what we saw from Florida State, Georgia? I don't know. I don't know, again, if it was a consolation game or if they did not want another embarrassing semifinal with Florida State, because the semifinals have been embarrassing the past 5 years. Why would you give a Florida State team, even if it was the team against Louisville, put them up against Georgia? What are you trying to prove? And maybe just as many players would have opted out against Liberty saying, I don't want to play Liberty. Fuck them. They're shit. Fine. And then that would have made it an even closer game, maybe. I don't know. This is in hindsight, is 2020. When the bowl schedule came out, that was the first thing that went through my mind was, this is wrong. You got the wrong matchups here for whatever reason. But let's go to the semifinals last night. 2 really good games. Holy cow. Michigan beating Alabama 27-20 in overtime. Physical game. Defense dominated for most of the game on both sides. Michigan down 20-13. They put a drive together at the end to tie the game at 20. With 1:34 left, they wound up converting a 4th and 2 from their own 28 to keep the drive alive. Now, the end of the game, there was like this weirdness of it's 20-20. Alabama had the ball. Couldn't do anything with it. Punts it back to Michigan. The Michigan returner fumbles it at the 5, recovers it, gets tackled at the 1. And now there's like 45 seconds or whatever left. Michigan runs the ball first. Alabama uses a timeout. They kneel on 2nd down. Alabama waits till about 12 seconds to go and then calls a timeout. So now it's 3rd down. Then they're about to snap it. Harbaugh uses a timeout for Michigan. And I don't understand why. Or maybe Alabama only had 1 timeout left. And they wound up, after Blake Corum picked up 3 yards on 1st down, Alabama calls a timeout with 12 seconds to go. Then Michigan kneels, and as the clock's winding down, 3-2-1, Harbaugh takes a timeout with like 2 seconds to go or 1 second left. Why would you do that? The worst case scenario is with time on the clock, if they fumble the snap on a kneel down into the end zone and Alabama recovers, they win the semifinal. What's the reason to call a timeout there? Even if you have 10 players on the field, just let the clock run. Doesn't matter. That was the first, quizzical thing that in the semifinals, but then it goes to overtime. Corum scores a 17-yard run, and they stop Alabama on Alabama's possession, and they called a quarterback draw on 4th and goal from, I think, what was it, the 7-8, whatever it might have been. Terrible. I mean, it's not a terrible call because it got stopped. It was a terrible call. The minute they snapped the ball and I saw what it was, I said to my son on the screen, this is a terrible call. It has to be a run-pass option. That was just a run up the middle, And maybe you're thinking about catching Michigan sleeping. They did put their running back in motion, and that took the middle linebacker. The middle linebacker followed the running back down the screen or to the left of the screen, depending on how you were watching it or how they replayed it. But that's a good defensive front. And you're risking a lot on one play where you have no outs. At least if you drop Jalen Milroe back, no one's open, he can scramble or he can push to the line of scrimmage, get the Michigan defenders to think he's going to run, and then just maybe throw it to someone who breaks open. You needed some sort of a 2 or 3-way go there. Read option, a read option that can turn into a throw, something, but a QB draw. Again, not a terrible decision because it got stopped. It was a terrible decision the second he snapped the ball and I saw what the play was. Now, the second semifinal, which started late and ended really late, I think I got into bed at 10-1 after it ended. I'm glad I stayed up. Washington outlasts Texas 37-31. Yards, both teams went nuts. Washington 532, Texas 498. Washington had a 13-minute time of possession advantage. Texas had 2 turnovers, only 1 for Washington. Michael Penix Jr., 430 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Huskies. The end of this game, and the game went back and forth. I mean, Washington got up 37. They were up, 37-24. They were up 13. Texas, gets a touchdown to get it to 6. They try an onside kick with about a minute to go. Washington recovers on Texas's side of the field. The kick doesn't even go 10 yards. So they get the ball back at the the Texas 44. Minute 9 to go on the Texas 44. 2 timeouts that Texas has. If you kneel the ball 3 times, Washington would be forced to punt and Texas would get the ball back with less than 20 seconds left. And just assume that the punter's just going to kick it out of the end zone. There's no reason to coffin kick it or do anything where you could potentially shank the kick. Just kick it out of the end zone, guarantee no return. Ball comes out to the 20 with less than 20 seconds to go. Texas has no timeouts. They need a touchdown. If you kneel it 3 times, they don't. Washington runs the ball 3 times, and what happens? Their running back gets hurt on the 3rd down run, which stops the clock with 50 seconds left. Washington has to use their timeout as an injury timeout. Washington punts. The Texas returner is interfered with by the Washington long snapper. 15 more yards. So now it's 1st and 10 Texas at their own 31 with 45 seconds to go. You could feel it start slipping away. Quinn Ewers hits a deep pass down the right sideline down to the Washington 28. They get it down to the 12. Washington 12. 1st down with 10 seconds to go or 12 seconds to go. They throw a swing pass to the running back who, when he catches it, he's right out of bounds and goes out of bounds, loses a yard, wastes 5 seconds. So now you have 1 or 2 play. They completely wasted a play throwing the ball horizontally. You have to throw it to the end zone or inside the 2 with your receiver running back running to give him a chance to get in. 2nd down play, incomplete. 3rd down play, incomplete. The fact that Texas was even in this game, they should feel grateful because Washington completely mismanaged the clock. It's a shame the running back got hurt. But what are the odds of anybody getting hurt on a kneel down? The one thing you can't get back in this sport is time. And yes, Washington can say, well, what if our running back breaks it for a 1st down? Then we don't have to punt and we don't have to worry about it at all. Yes, sure. If you're at your own 20, maybe you do that because you want to maybe get some yards because if you're punting, Texas might end up with decent field position no matter what, but you're at their 44. You're dictating field position before you even punt. Texas could not hurt you with 3 kneel downs and a punt. They wouldn't have crossed midfield. They wouldn't have probably gotten it close enough for a Hail Mary. And this is a reminder going back to a regular season game between the Miami Hurricanes and Georgia Tech, where Miami was up, 5 6 points, under 40 seconds to go. They're in Georgia Tech territory. Again, Miami is up by 5 or 6. Instead of kneeling, which would have literally ended the game, they hand it off, running back fumbles, Georgia Tech recovers. In a couple plays, they throw a bomb to a receiver who gets behind the secondary. Georgia Tech wins the game. I don't know the fascination with these dumb-ass coaches and coordinators who will not take either the sure thing or the very nearly super close to being a sure thing. It's not playing it safe, it's playing it smart. I know there are 2 words that start with S, and it might confuse you, dumb coaches. Safe is smart. It's okay to do the unsexy thing. I'm so against stupidity. Stupidity gets me aggravated. Assholes get me aggravated too. Stupidity and morons get me aggravated when, in any aspect of life, family, school, sports, work, neighbors, whatever, where you know someone is a moron and you can't help them because they're just a moron by their own volition or power. And I'm very rarely the smartest tool in the chest, or if ever, right? If ever. I think I'm a pretty logical, common sense, frugal, judicious type of person, but that doesn't mean I'm a smart person. But man, I hate dumb. Man, I hate dumb. So that leaves us with Michigan and Washington in the national championship from Houston. Michigan opened up as a 4.5-point favorite. The over-under is 55.5. I'm not even going to pick. I just want to see a good game. I want to see a really good final. These are contrasting styles, right? Michigan can score points, but they usually do it against just crap Big Ten teams or out-of-conference teams. They don't have an explosive offense. They can run the ball down Washington's throat. Texas was doing that in the first half. It slowed down a bit in the second half, and Washington was gaining some separation, which caused Texas to throw the ball more, which they were doing with some success. J.J. McCarthy and company for Michigan, they can throw the ball as well. I mean, they got their had-to-have-it drive at the end of the fourth quarter to force overtime, but Michigan is a bigger, stronger team than Washington. So is Texas. And Washington isn't a team that's probably going to run for a whole lot, especially if their lead running back, who was in an immense amount of pain on that third down, that helped stop the clock. One other thing about that, and I know this might not be the nicest thing in the world to say, but if you're Washington players and you're aware and you know the situation and you see your guys down in pain, pick him up and drag his ass off the field, save the timeout. Or even if you're the running back and you know what the situation is with the timeouts, and maybe these players didn't. If you're hurt, you get up, you hobble, you ask someone, get me off the field, run someone else back on so we don't have to use a timeout. I don't mean to sound heartless. We're not talking about, a spinal paralysis or anything. He hurt his foot and he was in a lot of pain. I feel bad for this kid. He was in a lot of pain, but get him up and get his ass off the field. Washington wins that game with much less stress and anxiety. But back to national championship. As a former 49er head coach who lost the championship, Jim Harbaugh, I'm pulling for him. I would love to see Michigan get that win, because if he gets the win, then all bets are off of, is he going to stay? How much money is Michigan going to throw at him? Harbaugh signed with a new agent, Don Yee. Is he going to be a Chargers head coach? Is he going to be the Bears head coach? Is he going to go to the NFL? If he wins the national championship in college, then he's going to see that the NFL might be unfinished business. But it would be a great story if Washington wins the national championship as well. And I want to see great players play great, whether it winds up being a shootout, a game in the low to mid-20s. I want to see Penix have a great game. I want to see Corum have a great game. I want to see the Michigan defense play well. I want to see the Washington defense get some stops when they need to. I would love for this game to be within one score heading into the fourth quarter, or just with a few minutes to go. And after all is said and done, should Alabama be in? Should Texas be in? Should Georgia be in? What about Florida State? The two teams in the national championship are both conference champs and undefeated. So whether or not the selection committee did something right or not, the football gods and the college football universe set things straight, and we have number one versus number two undefeated teams playing for the national championship. Let's move to movies. I finally, a few days ago, watched on Disney Plus Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now, this is a movie that made less than $200 domestically, did not do great globally, did a lot worse than the previous movie, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I wasn't hesitant to watch it. I actually turned off the Ohio State Missouri bowl game because that was just brutal. It was, I think, 3-0 Missouri at the time. No one could move the ball. It's another terrible bowl game. Put this on, 2.5-hour movie, watched it in one sitting. It was a fun Indiana Jones movie. They didn't make Harrison Ford, who, is in his mid-70s in real life and as the character, do anything ridiculous where you would say, oh, a 70-something-year-old shouldn't do that. Actually, there was something at the end that I'm going to get into that was a little hard to believe, but it really didn't have as much to do with his age and lack of athleticism or being, a physical hero anymore. But, the story revolves around Indiana Jones wound up marrying Marilyn, whatever her name was, his love from The Last Crusade, and the mother that was in the movie, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, divorced because their son Mutt wound up dying, enrolling in one of the wars. And he lives by himself in an apartment in New York City, and he's a professor. He's an archaeology professor at some university in New York City. His friend's daughter, who's his goddaughter, winds up coming to him thinking that he has half of an ancient dial that if you find both pieces, could find fissures in time and you can travel into the past or the future based on certain coordinates and math, etc. So listen, it was a fun quasi-globe-trotting type of adventure with Nazis again being the big bad. Mads Mikkelsen, who most recently played Grand Admiral Thrawn in the Star Wars Ahsoka series on Disney Plus, is essentially your main villain. He's got a couple of henchmen that are out trying to, capture Indy and his goddaughter and, a young boy who's helping them as well. In addition to other friends that Indiana Jones has, that are helping him along the way. It was a good, fun movie. I don't really have many negatives to say about it. I think there were some parts in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull that were absolutely ridiculous. Not to say that a time travel element is not ridiculous, but the scene with Shia LaBeouf swinging from vines like Tarzan with a bunch of monkeys to try to catch up to the cars that were kind of driving, along the edge of a cliff in the jungle. It wasn't a terrible movie, and Harrison Ford was, at that point, I think, late 50s or early 60s, so some of the things he was doing was a little bit more believable. They kept that aspect of Indiana Jones more under wraps, which was fine. But something that happens at the end of the movie, Indiana Jones winds up getting shot by the Nazis in a cave where they're looking for the other half of this dial. It gets shot like close to his heart. Not exactly, not on his heart, he would have died, but in that vicinity. Starts bleeding, tired, whatever, winds up, getting dragged out of this cave. And they had it wasn't just like you're getting dragged 10 feet and you're out of the cave. There's bridges, and they have to climb down, stuff, whatever. Gets dragged out of the cave onto an airplane. And the fact that he doesn't, he seems to get more energy as time goes on, but meanwhile, he got shot between his heart and his shoulder, and he's not dying. He's not bleeding out. And he's in his 70s, so age should have something to do with that too. It's almost like the wound was not even affecting him toward the end. The plane winds up going through one of the time fissures. They wind up, if you haven't watched the movie, just skip ahead. They wind up going back in time to ancient Rome invading ancient Greece. They meet the character Archimedes, who invented this Dial of Destiny, and Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, wants to stay. He's like, listen, I've always been studying history, now I'm living it. He didn't want to get back on another plane that came through and go back through the fissure, back to their own time. And what winds up happening is his goddaughter basically knocks him out, punches him, drags him to the plane, and drags him back to the present. So just the whole being shot not bleeding out, not going uncaught. Like, that was the only thing. They could have not shot Indiana Jones, just maybe punched him, smacked him with a gun, or tied him up, something to incapacitate him. But the bullet and the bleeding and the having really no negative effects on him for the remainder of the movie was a little odd. But to me, better movie than the last movie. And it's interesting, going on Reddit and websites and social media, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull has aged well to a lot of people. I don't know why. It feels like an Indiana Jones movie. It wasn't awful when, when it came out, it was still the fourth best, also known as the worst of the previous three: Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade. That's fourth. And this movie, I did enjoy more. So I would put this fourth. Some people have Kingdom of the Crystal Skull first or second. I listen, personal preference, to each their own, but Raiders of the Lost Ark was, it was an action movie, but it was a really well done Spielberg movie. Temple of Doom, I have a soft spot. Like, that's kind of a step down, but it was a more fun movie than Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark was much more serious, more of an adult action movie, where Temple of Doom, that seriousness was notched down a bit. And then I think Last Crusade was just a nice melding of everything, having the father-son connection between Indiana Jones and his father, and then going for the Holy Grail, and Nazis once again being the evildoers. The Nazis weren't the evildoers in the second movie, or not so much anyway. It was more the cult of Kali that they were fighting. But Kingdom of the Crystal Skull with the aliens and the spaceship, tonally, it still felt okay. You're dealing with mystical stuff. First was the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, and that was, religious mystical energy. Temple of Doom, you have, that one priest pulling people's hearts out. That's not possible. So that's ridiculous too. Last Crusade was the Cup of Christ and an immortal knight and immortality. So, that's over the top too. Aliens, time travel, is it really that much of a departure versus the first three movies? Maybe a little bit more so, because now you're going more into maybe like sci-fi versus pure fantasy or religious spiritualism, whatever you want to call it. Fun movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a nice way to close out the Indiana Jones series. You thought it was going to happen with Indiana Jones 4, with Shia LaBeouf maybe becoming the next Indiana Jones or a younger version. That just never took off because at the time people didn't like him. But now, much like, I guess, the Star Wars prequels, things seem to age, or people look more fondly back on it. How I felt about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull today is how I felt about it when I first watched it. I've seen it multiple times since. It's an okay Indiana Jones movie, but it's ranked last in my rankings. So let's conclude with Week 18 NFL picks. 2 Saturday games. Pittsburgh fighting for a wild card spot. They need a win and help. At Baltimore, a team just like the Niners, how many players can they afford to sit? I think even with Baltimore's backups, they will find a way to beat the Steelers and knock them. These are rivals, right? And completely knock them out of the playoffs. Houston at Indianapolis, the winner clinches a wild card spot, but the winner could also clinch the AFC South if Jacksonville loses on Sunday. I will take Gardner Minshew and the Indianapolis Colts at home. Cleveland at Cincinnati. Cleveland's got nothing to play for. They are locked in as the 5 seed. I'll take the Bengals. Minnesota at Detroit. Detroit could still get the 2 seed. I will take the Lions. Who knows who's going to start for the Vikings, but it should not be Jaron Hall. He is terrible. Jaguars at the Titans. Doesn't mean anything for Tennessee, but even for the teams it means nothing for. They're dangerous teams. They have nothing to lose. They go for it on 4th down. Onside kick, fake field goals, whatever. Send the house on blitzes. They want to play spoiler, but I think Jacksonville, granted, they shut out the Panthers, but that was still a good, you shut out anybody, it's a good showing. Jacksonville will win at Tennessee. I will take the Jets at New England. New England has been playing better recently, but this is the game where the Jets snap their streak against the Patriots and hurt themselves in the number 1 first-round pick slotting order all at once, which really doesn't matter because they're not taking a quarterback no matter how high or low they would have drafted, because Aaron Rodgers and that team needs more help position-wise outside of quarterback. Atlanta at New Orleans could possibly be for the NFC South, depending on what Tampa Bay does. God, I hope Atlanta doesn't win the NFC South. They are just a boring team and not a team I want to watch in the playoffs at all. I will take the Saints after their impressive win this past weekend at Tampa, who is at the Panthers. Tampa Bay at Carolina this week. Baker Mayfield, I think, had to leave the game, took a bad shot to the ribs against the Saints. I'm sure he's a tough guy. I'm sure he's going to go for a game that if Tampa Bay wins, they clinch the NFC South and get a home game. So I will take Tampa. Chicago at Green Bay. I'm not 100% sure if this is a win and in scenario for the Packers or if they also need the Seahawks to lose, but I think they will get the victory. Love and company looked pretty good last week against the Vikings and a good Vikings defense. I'll take the Packers. Denver at Las Vegas, one of the few games that literally means nothing for both teams. I will take the Raiders at home. Philadelphia at the Giants. Would love to see the Giants beat Philadelphia. Just another, I don't want to say a nail in the Eagles' coffin, but just another peg to knock them down. But I think the Eagles, while they may not totally get right against the Giants, I think they will win the game. Seattle at Arizona. This is a game the Seahawks need and some help to make the playoffs. I think if Seattle wins and Green Bay loses, Seattle's in. If Green Bay wins and Seattle loses, Green Bay is in. I think I would have to double check that. But I'm going to take Arizona. Arizona showed a lot at Philadelphia, put up 35 points. Kyler Murray looked pretty good. The running game looked pretty good. And Seattle they scored on the Steelers, but to lose a game at home against Pittsburgh, very average team is, I think, going to be tough for them to bounce back from. Chiefs can't do any better, really, than the number 3 seed. They don't have much to play for. At the Chargers, I will take the Chargers. I took the Rams at the 49ers. Dallas at Washington. It would be a very Dallas thing to do after they won that game against the Lions with the whole 2-point conversion confusion. Did the lineman report or not? Then Dan Campbell, with his big brass balls, decides to go for a 2-point conversion again from the 7-yard line instead of kicking the extra point. A lot mismanaged by the Lions there, and the Cowboys in some ways, in a couple ways, did get lucky. And it would be a very Cowboy thing to do to go to Washington and lose, and then the Eagles win and they wind up losing the division. But Washington looks very apathetic. They're playing out the string. They know Del Rio's gone. Who knows player-wise who's going to come back? I'll take the Cowboys. And the Sunday night game to decide the AFC East. Winner wins the East, but if Buffalo loses and Pittsburgh beats Baltimore on Saturday, the Bills are out of the playoffs altogether. All that being said, I think this is a game where Jalen Waddle comes back after Miami got totally slapped around. Was it 56-19 at Baltimore? This is a must-have-it game. I think Miami, too much for Buffalo. And if they can make this a Josh Allen has to throw to win, the Dolphins will certainly win because Buffalo's formula has been to not ask Josh Allen to do too much. And do we ask elite quarterbacks to not do too much and manage the game? No. That's why he's not elite. That's why he's not great. That's why he is in my very good category. So I will take the Dolphins. Lot to sort out, lot to see between now and Saturday and Sunday, but a lot of games, except really for 3 of them, actually means something to one of the teams. Why they may not be super sexy matchups. Houston, Indianapolis isn't a sexy matchup to a lot of people, unless you're fans of those teams, but that's got major implications. And then you'll end Saturday with a major implications game and end Sunday as well with Buffalo and Miami. So that concludes the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. Hope everyone had a very happy and safe and healthy New Year's and holiday season. Between now and then, there will not be another podcast this week. There's just not that much to talk about for the Niners, and I want to save any sort of playoff previews or look back on the season during the bye week. So this week and next may be just one podcast just to save what the first round bye means, And I don't want to just stretch out content just for the sake of stretching out content. But between now and then, when we talk next, there will be a national champion in college football, whether it's Washington or Michigan. The playoffs will be set, and we will be going through all the playoff matchups on the next podcast. So a lot of good football to watch between now and then. Basketball, hockey, whatever you're into, even if it's not sports, enjoy. Everyone stay happy, healthy, and safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.